I hope he said something well, because I didn't understand a single word. Thank you. I'm going to steal about 20 minutes of your time, and I'm happy to be back in Vilnius. I have quite a lot of operation here, and I remember one thing, and that was when I was heading Tele2, we were opening up here in Lithuania, and we were struggling for many years. And we were quite successful both in Estonia, Latvia, but here we really struggled. And the owner of Tele2, he said to me that you can't sell it before you change the management at least 3 times. And when we changed the 3rd time, it was skyrocketing. I think you could remember that, because it's very important. Who are the people running the business? Probably the most important. I'm going to share my view of disruptive markets. I have been in the telecom industry, I've been in the pharmacy industry, I've also been in many other areas where the market is changing very rapidly. It worked a couple of minutes ago. It's because I'm a technical guy. Now, who could have guessed that the most valued transport company didn't own a single car? What's the company? It's Uber. We had an electrical company or car manufacturer who actually skipped the dealership and starting to sell the cars on internet, and that's Tesla. And I think you also forgotten that the first Apple phone actually came just 10 years ago. So once again, the world is changing very rapidly. Many of my friends says that, Lars, you must be happy to work with IKEA because, I mean, you will always have a bed, you will always have a chair to sit in, so that must be really nice just coming in there and get the money. Yeah, sure, I can tell you. This is also a very disruptive market. And I was in the States a couple of months ago, and I can tell you there, I were in one IKEA store, and they have recognized that out of the 20 people up to 25 years who bought stuff at IKEA have never put their foot in the store. Amazing. Another thing which has happened in this e-commerce world is that if the line in certain stores in the US is more than 3 people, you just leave the goods because you can't stand waiting there. So it is a very disruptive world. Today, the turnover of IKEA is roughly 5–6% is e-commerce. In UK, which is the most advanced, we are about 15%. We are in a very disruptive world, but then we should actually remember ourselves that the world has always been disruptive. I mean, e-commerce is just some kind of advanced mail order. And I think the only difference here when it comes to disruption is that the speed is changing. It's changing so rapidly. And I saw an investigation saying that when a product was doing well in the States, and it was repeated here in Europe for 20, 30 years ago. It took about between 1 and 2 years before you reached a success in continental Europe. Today, that time limit is about weeks. So, just a couple of slides of IKEA then. And our aim or our vision is then, of course, to create a better everyday life. And what's the core of this then? I would say the biggest invention is price, in combination with function and design, of course. But our leader here, Mr. Kamprad, he passed away just a month ago. And he became 91 years old, but he has outlined the company for at least another 200 years. When I asked him, when you talk about long-term, Ingvar, what kind of hindsight do you have? 200-300 years, roughly. We are about 400 stores, quite profitable, investing a lot here in Lithuania. And I can tell you, which actually show me the commitment here in this country, is that every year one store is elected as the best store in the world. Last year it was Lithuania. And that in competition with China, Japan, in all countries, I think that's a major achievement. So we are doing very well here. So I have then had the. Now I come to the point with my old presentation, and that is stay close to the customer. I have had the opportunity to work together with all these entrepreneurs, Ingvar Kamprad, Erling Persson, and Mr. Stenbeck. And I have another example of what is important in business. When I heard that we had an opportunity to buy a mobile operator in Latvia, I called Jan Stenbeck here and said, Jan, we have an opportunity to buy one of the operators in Latvia. I think it's about 200 million euros. And then he said, if it feels good in your stomach, buy it. Yeah, but shouldn't I make a business plan or something? And then he said, oh, I get disappointed of you, Lars, because you must know that that's a waste of time. That decision took about 20 minutes. But when it came to the SIM card you put into the telephone, if that should be red or black or green, I could have been fired 2 times in a single week. Because that was something the customer cared about. And I always get the question from journalists, what do these guys have in common? They have one thing in common, and that is that they are so close to the customer all the time. They are just concerning about the customer interface and nothing else. And I can tell you, this is the biggest problem in many companies, that you reframe yourself from the customer. You need to continue to be close to the customer, and that will be your biggest weapon against the disruption in the market, I can promise you. In many companies, we have holy cows. You recognize them. And I can tell you just one example. In IKEA, then, in this e-commerce world, it was the more you bought from e-commerce at IKEA, the more expensive the transport got. Do you follow me? I mean, the more you bought, the higher price of the transport. That's the opposite how it works today. The more you buy, the less you have to pay for the transport. And that took us years to change. And I think that these holy cows are always a problem when you try to adopt to your customer. When I get into this kind of disruptive market, when people ask me what can be done to come closer to the customer, I think there are a couple of things I try to look into. The first thing is that, do we have the right customer focus? Is it the customer, or is it some CFO running the business? Or IT department? Nowadays it's the IT department. I want to do this and this. You have to talk to the IT department. They are the new stars in some companies. Right customer focus, but because I'm sure that probably 25% of you here are running your business not appropriate to the customer demands. Time. We need to have the speed. And when I say speed, I can tell you that, what's the name? Amazon, which is, you have heard about it. That's something you can bring back to the IT department when you get home. They don't start an IT project if it takes longer than 6 months from idea to implementation. It's never happened at IKEA. It takes 2 years. And consequent management. If people don't deliver, they get a second chance, or maybe even a third chance, but you can't keep them there forever. So what is speed? That's also something which the customer actually defines. And it might not be the speed we are thinking about. I have this example, and that was when we were looking into, you know, if you order at the internet, then they ask the customer, what's the most important, to have it in 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days? And I say, yeah, of course, to have it in 1 day. The second question was, if you could choose exactly the time for delivery, if it takes 1 or 2 or 3 days, what is your preference then? And the people said, it's more important that I get it at a specific time, not how many days it takes. And the whole industry is gearing against fast delivery. So once again, you need to make sure what the customer wants. This is probably my most important picture, and that's about customer focus. And I mean, we are all customer oriented. But let me take an example from Ingvar Kamprad, the founder of IKEA. The way he worked was that, you know, he lived in Switzerland, and we had a head office in Sweden. And in holiday time, holiday season, he drove the whole way from Switzerland up to Sweden. Took, well, roughly 20 hours. And I told him that, Ingvar, I mean, you can fly, it's quite cheap today. Yeah, but you know, I have to buy beers in Denmark. And then I need to have the refund on the way back. And I'm not joking. So when I came there for the holiday, he went into the cash line and asked all the people, what do you think we are doing wrong? What do you think we are doing right? How was the meatball? Is the opening hours, does it suit you? How was the parking lot? Was the space too narrow? Was it too wide? Did you find your trolley, etc., etc.? And then he interviews these customers for 3-4 days. And then he enters into the head office and said, hello, how are you doing? What do you have on your agenda? And they say, we have this and this and that. And then Ingvar says, it's amazing. I've been talking to 300 customers. They have never mentioned it. And I think this is one of the reasons why IKEA and many other companies are successful. They keep the customer orientation. And I mean, we all meet these kind of things every day, I would say. I came to London last week, just another example. I have been flying for 23 hours. I came to the hotel 12:15. My meeting was starting at 1 o'clock. And I came to the reception. It was Holiday Inn, a major chain. And I said, please, I've been traveling for 23 hours. Could I please have my room and just take a shower before we start here in 45 minutes? And then they said, sorry, you haven't bought early check-in. But Jesus, I've been traveling 23 hours. We have 30 persons here. No, sorry, it's not possible. Yeah, but could I use the gym just to take a shower before I start the meeting? Can't use the gym before you checked in. And you have probably many of these examples. Here is a new hospital in Stockholm. It has cost, I think it's roughly 4 billion euro. It's the biggest hospital investment ever. 4 billion euros. It's a lot of money. My son broke his arm, and when they have put the plastic on him, he got the paper. And I'm not joking. This was how the paper was looking, despite these 4 billion. That was the customer. That was the customer got after the visit on that hospital. For those of you who have a little bit glance of Swedish language, I can tell you, on top of it, it is if you break a leg. It's not if you break an arm, which he did. These kind of experience is so easy to see when it comes to other companies. But when it comes to your own, you need to take the customer way to understand it. And so my recommendation to you, continue to work at Tele2. I demanded everybody to work in the customer care for at least 4 days a year. And I can tell you, I made my 4 days a year in the customer care, and I had a total different view of the company when I came back from the customer care center. I think that's very important in this agile world. This is something also which I think starts to become more and more problem. Keep it simple. I am on a board of many companies, and I can tell you, the more paper you have, the worse it goes for the company. I'm also at SAS, you can imagine the pack. When at IKEA, when the board material gets more than 15 pages, and then we have at least a turnover of roughly 40 billion euros. Then Ingvar always said, is it not going well for us any longer? And I think there is a disease we have to make everything very complicated. I think we need to think about that, because it is a disaster for also for the company, because nobody understands what you say. So keep up the simple things. I have 40 seconds left. And this is also, I said that the customer focus was the important part. The second part is that we made an investigation in when I were at Tele2. who were the most successful people in the organization. And it happened to be, they had this in common. Be on time, call back, don't lie, never park at the customer parking. And I will explain. Be on time, it's quite simple. Even though I had an Italian guy in my management team, he didn't manage it in 4 years' time. I said to him, dear Andrette Filippetti, you work in a Scandinavian company, and when we say we start 9, we start 9. I was like, oh, Mr. Jarnheimer, it isn't good for your heart. It's not good for your career. Call back. You know, we have some people never call back, and those who always call back. I think it's important to call back. Don't lie, it's not that simple. I've tried to be honest, at least for the last 30 minutes, but and never park at the customer parking is another funny story. That was, we were about to hire a technical officer in Tele2. It was one girl called Maria and one boy called Richard. And we said, who should we select? And we couldn't made our mind up. So we waited to the day after. And then one guy, when we were in my office, said that, look, Richard is parking at the customer care parking when he's out of time. We can't have people parking on the customer parking. And I was like, right, we take Maria. And then you say, no, it can't be made like this. It is exactly the way it is. It is exactly the way it is. It's not more complicated. If we can't keep these promises between ourselves in the organization, we can't keep these promises to the customers. That's why it's so important. What I've tried to tell you here today is that stay close to the customer, be close in your operation to the customer, because that will be the most important, even though the world will be as disrupted as we see right now. Thank you very much, and have a nice Easter.